As you know, there are all sorts of global strategic challenges confronting the new Donald Trump administration. As you also know, during his first term, there were all sorts of staff changes and dramatic controversy, a little bit of a revolving door through the White House when it came to his advisers and his cabinet. But Robert O'Brien was someone who came in as his national security advisor and provided some stability and remained there for the second 2 years of that first term. And I caught up with him here today. Robert O'Brien, thanks for joining us. There was a lot of chaos in the first Trump administration, especially in the early years. What are the signs that he's better prepared the second time around?
Well, I think by the end of the first term, we had a great team in place with the cabinet. They were all on board with President Trump. They were America first and peace through strength. And so with the new cabinet, these are all people that support President Trump. In the first administration, we had people who came into the administration who didn't agree with President Trump, or who felt they had to be the guardrails or the adults in the room. We've now got a president who served as commander-in-chief for 4 years. He knows what he wants, and he's got a great team with him.
Well, let's talk about that team to some degree at least. Pete Hegseth in defence. Obviously, he's known as a media personality primarily. He had a military career earlier. How do you think he'll go getting hold of the vast military bureaucracy?
Well, Pete Hegseth served in the armed forces. He was deployed to Iraq, so he's seen as a young officer, you know, the military from the bottom up, and he's going to be I think a soldier's secretary. I think the men and women of the armed services are going to really respond to his leadership and the strength that he projects. So, and he's on board 100% with Donald Trump. So he'll be confirmed, and I think he'll do a great job leading the department.
And what about Marco Rubio, one-time presidential aspirant, now as Secretary of State? He's got a mammoth task ahead of him in such a fragile global environment.
Well, look, it's a different world than that Donald Trump's inheriting the first time around. It's a world of flame. We left the office and the world was at peace. We had the Abraham Accords. We had peace in Europe, peace in Asia. Now you've got a war in Ukraine. You've got a war in the Middle East with Iran. And so Marco's going to have his hands full. But look, he chaired the Senate Intelligence Committee. He was the ranking member on that committee. He's been in the Senate for 13 years. He knows what's going on, and he's got the stature having run for president and having been a national figure and even a world figure in the past. I think he's going to take on this challenge with robustness.
Let's talk about a couple of those big strategic challenges, because, as you say, Donald Trump quite rightly is returning the focus to peace through strength. Look at the Middle East. There's no doubt that the ceasefire that's in place now would not have occurred without Donald Trump's election and the threats he was making. But it's still very fragile, isn't it? You're dealing with a terrorist organisation in Hamas. What do you think Donald Trump will do to eradicate or eliminate the influence of Hamas, and perhaps more importantly, push back against Iran and the way it used all sorts of actors in the region to destabilise it?
Look, you've hit it on the head, Chris. These Iranian proxies are bad actors. They're malign influences in the whole Middle East. So you've got the Houthis, you've got the Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq, you've got Hezbollah in Lebanon, which the Israelis have done a good job degrading, and you've got Hamas, and that's just the start of it. And so, we're pushing back on Iran. Expect more pushback on Iran, and Iran should be very nervous. But these other organizations like Hamas that are holding American hostages, holding Israeli hostages, they ought to take a look at what President Trump did with ISIS in the first term. ISIS was shut down. We eliminated the entire caliphate, and then we went and got Baghdadi. And what I've said is, for these ISIS terrorists who are holding American hostages and holding Israeli hostages, Baghdadi's life ended in a tunnel under a compound, being chased by a Belgian Malinois military working dog. That's going to be their fate if they don't let these American hostages go and let them go quickly.
Well, let's talk about Eastern Europe and Ukraine, of course. President Trump has said he can end that war. Will he be looking at doing a deal with Putin, trading land, territory for peace? And if so, how on earth would Vladimir Zelensky ever agree to that?
Well, look, at the end of the day, it's the Ukrainians that have to just settle the war with Russia, and they've got to decide what they want to do with their territory, and if they want to cede some territory for peace. But they're going to need really strong security guarantees. If not NATO membership, they're going to need allied countries to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. It can't just be a piece of paper, because we can't let Putin just have 5 years to rebuild, rearm, and attack Ukraine again like he's done twice in the past. So we have to have serious security guarantees for the Ukrainians, but ultimately they have to decide what they want to give up for peace. Right now, the sad thing in Ukraine, it's not a matter of money. It's a matter of men. And Chris, the Ukrainians are losing thousands and thousands of men, and they're a small country up against a very big country with Russia. So they've got to decide what they want to do. But the real question is, Ukrainian manpower. And now with the Russians bringing the North Koreans in to fight for them, it's a real hard road to hoe for the Ukrainians. We've got to be there to support them. We got to bring Vladimir Putin to the table. Probably further economic sanctions against the Russians, either threatened or imposed, will help bring Putin to the table.
So many challenges, so much happening, so much action yesterday. It must be the most action in terms of policy decisions, executive orders ever seen in America on one day, especially the first day, half a day really, of a sitting president. But let's unpick at least one of those. President Trump says he's going to retake the Panama Canal. What on earth does that mean, and what are we going to see happen?
Well, I think that was the biggest news from the inaugural speech, is the issue with Panama. And so the canal is critical to America. That's how we move our ships, our warships, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. We're a two-ocean country. We have to be able to move our fleet back and forth. But we also have 70% of the shipping that goes through the canal goes to American ports. So the canal is the lifeblood for the American economy. We gave the canal. We built the canal at great cost of men and material and expense. We helped Panama get its independence with the canal, and we ran the canal for many, many years. Now, in a terrific act of generosity, we gave the canal back to the Panamanians, which they should have appreciated. Hopefully, they do. But the Panamanians then gave the operation of the canal by putting the port on the east and the west of the canal. They gave the ports to the Chinese. We didn't give the canal, as the president said yesterday, we didn't give the canal back to the Chinese, which is our leading geopolitical foe. We gave it to the Panamanians. So if the Panamanians can't run it, we'll run it for them.
But how will that happen in practical terms?
Well, look, in practical terms, if the Panamanians should kick the Chinese out of Panama immediately. That's the first thing they should do, and get back in compliance with the treaty. And they should stop putting huge charges on American shipping, which is a drain on our economy, and go back to fair pricing for the canal and kick the Chinese out. And that'd be a start. Otherwise, they're going to lose the canal.
Now, a question that's so important for Australia, is AUKUS safe under President Trump 2.0?
AUKUS is very safe, and President Trump had a great relationship with Scomo, with Scott Morrison. He brought Scott Morrison here for a state visit that I was at the dinner. It was amazing. And the relationship between the President of Australia is strong. It'll be strong even under a different party and the current Prime Minister. So the American-Australian relationship is rock solid. And AUKUS is going to be rock solid as well.
Robert O'Brien, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you, Chris. It's great to be with you, and say hi to all the folks back in Australia for me.